All right, so on the previous video, we did all of the top, or previous videos, we did all of the top part, which was practicing the entire quadratic formula. On this second part, we're not going to do the whole thing. We're just going to focus in on the discriminant, right? If your discriminant, like this guy, when we looked at our discriminant, which is the negative 9 squared minus 4 times 2 times 12, if your discriminant ends up being negative, like it ended up being negative right here, you end up with no solution. Why? Because you can't do the square root of a negative, all right? If your discriminant ends up being any positive number, like right here, when we did this discriminant, we ended up with a 16. That was a positive number. If it's positive, you're going to end up with two real answers. You're going to end up with two real answers. So if your discriminant's negative, you don't end up with no real answers. If it's any number that's positive, you end up with two answers. If your discriminant is 0, you're only going to end up with one answer. Okay, if your discriminant is 0, you're only going to end up with one answer because it doesn't matter if you add or subtract 0, you still get one answer only. So let's do the even ones on this video. I believe we already did number 16 on a previous video. Let's start with 18. And once again, you can't apply the quadratic formula until it's in standard form set equal to 0. So you have to add 7. Let's rewrite our whole thing. 2x squared plus 12x plus 7 equals 0. Now, normally we go through the whole entire quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. And we know that our a value is 2, our b value is 12, and our c value is 7. So if we were to plug in our b value of 12 right there, right here, and our a value of 2 down here and up here, and our c value of 7 right there at the very end, we could continue and find the actual solutions to this equation. We could actually find the x-intercepts of this parabola if we kept going all the way through. But the instructions don't say solve it. It says find the discriminant, which is the inside value right here. Find the discriminant and determine based on that discriminant if you have one answer, two answers, or no answers. When do we have no answers? When this whole thing is negative, because you can't do the square root of a negative. When do we have one answer? When this whole thing is 0, because when you add 0, it's still going to be a negative 12, and if you subtract 0, it's still going to be a negative 12, so you only get one answer. When do you get two answers? When your discriminant is any positive number. It doesn't have to be a perfect square number. It could be any positive number, and you will end up with two answers. So I hope we understand that. Do we? Yeah. Okay, so let's work through this. What is 12 squared? 144. Okay, and then how about 4 times 2? 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 7 is 56, right? And yeah, it's going to be a minus 56 or a negative 56, whatever you want to call it. But this is telling us that our discriminant value is going to be 88. 144, take away 56 is 88. Thank you. And it is over 4. Now, I could continue and try to simplify the square root of 88, but they're not asking for the answers. They're just saying how many answers are you going to get? What's your discriminant? Well, my discriminant is the value 88. And if it's a positive value, how many answers am I going to get? 2 real answers. 2 real solutions. Or answers. Or roots, or whatever you want to call them. What do they call them on the back? I know that the discriminant is 88. 2 real solutions? Okay. Yeah, so you get 2 answers. 2 real solutions. Let's move on to number 20. Let's first start by moving that 12x over. Subtract 12x to both sides. You're going to rewrite it. It's going to be 4x squared minus 12x plus 9 equals 0. Now we could identify the a value being 4, the b value being negative 12, the c value being 9. And let's write out our entire quadratic formula, even though we don't need the whole thing. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. Again, we're focusing in just on the discriminant value. The b value is negative 12, so we're plugging in a negative 12 right there and right there. Our a value is 4 down there and up here. Our c value is 9 back there at the very end. Let's just worry about the inside of this square root, because that's a discriminant value. So when I go negative 12 squared, that's positive 144 again. And then when I go 4 times 4, that's 16. And 16 times 9 is 144. So we really have the 144 minus another 144. That's our discriminant value. So what is our discriminant value at the very end? 0. Okay, so just to continue practicing the formula, I have a 12 plus or minus the square root of 0 divided by 8. So I could stop right here, and I already know how many answers am I going to have. I'm only going to have one real answer. Only one real answer. So what they're asking for is, what's the discriminant? Oh, the discriminant is 0, and that means I'm going to have one real answer, or one real solution. Only one, not two. Now,
that's all you can ask for?
no, this is just on the second half of the homework. On the first half, I actually want you to give me the complete answer, right?
No, like I'm saying, like on this section here.
On this second half of the homework, yeah, just tell me what the discriminant is, the value inside the square root, after you do the math. And then based on that answer, if it's positive, you're going to put two answers, two real answers. If your discriminant is negative, you're going to put no real answers. If your discriminant is 0, you only get one real answer. Now, let me just take this a step further, just to really clarify what that one single answer is. Well, the square root of 0 is 0, right? And if you say 12 plus or minus 0 divided by 8, is that going to give you different answers, adding 0 and subtracting 0? No, it's going to give you the same answer, right? If you have like a 12 plus or minus 6, yeah, 12 plus 6 is 18, 12 minus 6 is 6. But if I have a 12 plus or minus 0, that plus or minus 0 doesn't change anything, right? It's still 12. So the only answer you get, whether you add 0 or subtract 0, the only real answer you get is that single answer, 12 over 8, which reduces down to 3 over 2, which is 1.5. So this parabola, if I were to graph this parabola right here, it would only touch the x-axis at the x value of 1.5. Does that make sense? You only get one answer. And on this section, they're not even asking for the real answer. They're just saying, how many real answers do you have? You only get one real answer. If I told you, what is that answer? Oh, the answer is 1.5. Because adding 0 or subtracting 0 doesn't make a difference. You only get one answer. Daniel, you got that? Okay. Let's move on to number 22. This one's a little more ridiculous because we have decimals. But it's already in standard form. And let's work out our formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a, where our a value is 2.5, b value is 3, c value is negative 0.5. So our b value is 3, our a value is 2.5, and our c value is negative 0.5. So I'm going to use a calculator here and just work out this discriminant. As a matter of fact, I want to type it all in exactly the way it is. So if you just take the time to type it in exactly the way it is on the Casio calculator, it will give you the answer, which is 14, which means that inside value is 14. It's positive. I could already stop, right? All they're asking for is that inside value. We already know the discriminant is 14 based on the calculator. How many answers are we going to have?
1, 2, 2.
1, 2, or 0?
2, 0.
2. If your discriminant is positive, you're going to end up with 2 real answers. Okay, 2 real solutions, right? Because the discriminant's positive. I mean, think about it, guys. The negative 3, like if I kept going with the formula, negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 14 divided by 2 times 2.5, that's going to be divided by 5. This is a decimal number, and you will get 2 different answers if you add square root of 14 to negative 3 and then subtract square root of 14 to negative 3. You're going to get 2 different answers. That's why we have 2 real answers based on this discriminant being positive. Yes. Let's move on to number 24. Number 24, again, rewrite it in standard form. You're going to subtract or get rid of the minus x by doing plus x, and get rid of the minus 1 by doing plus 1. So you're going to go plus x over here and plus 1 over here. This is your quadratic trinomial equation. Let me rewrite it. 1/4 x squared plus x plus 1 equals 0. Now, you could type in the b squared minus 4ac into your calculator. If you don't want to deal with fractions, you could also, because it's an equation that's set equal to 0, you could multiply everything by 4 if you wanted to. If you multiply by 4, it might make it a little easier for you. You're going to end up with 1x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 0. And now you could say, oh, my a value is 1, my b value is 4, my c value is 4. And then you could use the quadratic formula to determine your discriminant. Like I said, you could have done the discriminant with the original values, b squared, which would have been 1 squared with the original value, minus 4 times a, which is 1/4, times c, which is 1. You could have done that as well. Anyway, the discriminant is b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. b squared, that's 4 squared, minus 4 times a is 1, times c is 4. So we end up with a 16 right here, minus 16. So the discriminant value inside is going to be 16 minus 16, which is 0. So what's our discriminant value? It's 0. How many answers are we going to have? One real answer, one real solution. So the discriminant is 0, and that means that you have one real solution. Okay. If you wanted to actually find the solution, you'd have to actually plug in your a and your b right there and figure it all out. And it would actually be a -2, your one real solution. Anyways, we're done. I hope you guys finished this entire worksheet. If you need help, watch the other videos.